The countdown has begun. President Trump's decision is hours away. The stock market trembles, reflecting the weight of his proposed 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Tensions are boiling over as both countries brace for impact. If Mexico follows through on its warnings to cut off crucial oil and automotive parts, it could spark a trade war that no one anticipated. Can Mexico's backup plan dismantle the North American trade agreement? Or will both sides retreat to avoid mutual destruction? In a recent press briefing, President Claudia Sheinbaum shared insights that hinted at potential diplomatic solutions, a glimmer of hope amidst the looming threat. But she also warned that Mexico is preparing its countermeasures. American manufacturers are on the edge, terrified of skyrocketing costs and shortages. What happens if these threats materialize? Will they unravel everything from car assembly lines to energy security? A true moment of reckoning is upon us, and its consequences could reshape North America. China and Canada's recent retaliatory actions have turned the trade network upside down. With Mexico stating they are merely biding their time, could radical measures become the norm? If these tariffs persist, could they result in cutting off oil and natural gas? The once stable manufacturing chains, hinging on affordable labor and robust markets, are now teetering on the brink. America's heavy reliance on Mexico for its energy needs and automotive supply means that any retaliation could hit hard on U.S. soil. The stakes have never been higher. If President Trump's tariffs ignite a full-scale conflict, who will truly suffer? On March 4, President Sheinbaum took the mic, acknowledging the tariffs but opting for restraint, hoping to avoid immediate retaliation. This shows a clear strategy: diplomacy over destruction. But she's made it clear, Mexico has a contingency plan should the U.S. leave them no choice. Could the looming phone conversation between Trump and Sheinbaum provide a path of hope? Or will it simply be another step toward disaster? As pressure mounts, Sheinbaum promises a public meeting in El Zoco to unveil Mexico's countermeasures if tariffs persist. There's a palpable tension in the air, a sensation that change is inevitable. Mexico has reiterated its commitment to the North American market, even amidst escalating tensions. Trade relationships hang precariously as words fly like arrows between leaders, and the risks of escalating conflict are far from trivial. The rhetoric has reached fever pitch, and with each passing moment, a common front against the U.S. emerges. What if Mexico unites with Canada and China for a coordinated response? Can Trump withstand a multi-front attack that cripples vital U.S. industries? If Mexico cuts off oil flows, American refineries, especially in Texas, will be forced to confront a harsh reality: they might have to adapt quickly, or face disaster. This situation could spark inflation, affecting ordinary Americans and potentially altering political landscapes ahead of the elections. The notion of retaliation looms large as Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador gains ground with a message of resilience. Will trade negotiations falter under such relentless pressure? The stakes are monumental, and both sides seem eerily reminiscent of poker players, each holding their cards close to their chest. Can a delicate agreement emerge that protects both parties? Experts suggest a possible retreat, where tariffs soften and relations ease. However, Mexico's commitment to retaliation remains unwavering, a warning to the U.S. The next step could unleash substantial economic consequences. As both nations navigate this precarious pathway, their choices will echo across markets and families on both sides of the border, promising a climax that will alter the course of North American trade forever. Will cooler heads prevail, or is this just the beginning of a larger conflict? Only time will tell. Tensions in North America are reaching a boiling point as the countdown to President Trump's critical economic decision looms. With stock markets trembling, President Trump is poised to impose a staggering 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, igniting fears of an all-out trade war. Will Mexico retaliate decisively, or can diplomacy quell the storm? The stakes are sky-high, and the ripple effects could alter the economic landscape forever. As the trade frictions escalate, Mexico has made a bold declaration: if these tariffs continue, they will respond in kind. With critical oil and natural gas supplies hanging in the balance, the specter of a major confrontation looms over the North American Free Trade Agreement. American industries rely heavily on Mexico's affordable labor and vital imports. Every day, trucks shuttle hundreds of automotive parts between the two countries, flows that could be disrupted in an instant. At the heart of this standoff is Mexico's powerful position in energy resources. Refineries in the United States frequently purchase crude oil from their southern neighbor, creating an intricate economic chain. But if Mexico decides to cut off or tax these critical exports, American manufacturers could face dire consequences. President Claudia Sheinbaum took to the airwaves, acknowledging the tariffs but choosing restraint, hoping to navigate this minefield without triggering an explosive trade war. Sheinbaum's strategy hinges on leveraging diplomacy before resorting to retaliation. The stakes are immense. A hasty response could plunge both nations into chaos, ultimately harming their economies. She emphasized Mexico's commitment to its agreements and announced a pivotal phone call with President Trump set for March 6, a chance to directly address the tariffs and potentially steer both countries away from a disastrous confrontation. But if negotiations falter, Sheinbaum warned the world that Mexico has a contingency plan ready to go. Economic retaliation could hit at the heart of American industries, a powerful tactic in this high-stakes dialogue. Meanwhile, U.S. manufacturers are on edge, grasping the reality that their production could suffer heavily if Mexico retaliates by restricting oil and parts supplies. With each passing day, anxiety hangs thick in the air. The Japanese and European car manufacturers who rely on this trade face uncertainty, knowing that tariffs could cripple their business models. The looming question persists: will the two leaders reach a compromise and find common ground? Or will the Mexican government reveal their hidden strategy, igniting a titanic clash that neither side ever expected? The coming days will determine the fate of a fragile economic partnership that has been foundational to North American trade for decades. As the world watches, will cool heads prevail, or are we on the brink of a conflict that could impact millions? All bets are off as the clock ticks down, and the pressure mounts on both sides to act decisively. Tensions are escalating rapidly as President Trump prepares to unveil his tariff decisions that could fundamentally reshape trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. With stock markets trembling, the atmosphere crackles with uncertainty. Trump's threats of 25% tariffs hang like a dark cloud over North America, creating a potential ripple effect that has many biting their nails in apprehension. As these trade tensions reach a boiling point, Mexico stands poised with its own counter-strategies. President López Obrador insists that, should the U.S. follow through with the tariffs, Mexico is ready to retaliate. In the shadow of these threats lies a vast economic battlefield and intertwining of supply chains, energy resources, and automotive parts that could crumble under the weight of conflict. If Mexico decides to cut off vital energy supplies, the repercussions could send shockwaves throughout the U.S. economy. Amidst this brewing storm, President Claudia Sheinbaum prepares for a pivotal phone call with Trump. The stakes are high. Failure could trigger an all-out economic war. At a recent press conference, Sheinbaum acknowledged the U.S. tariffs but chose restraint, emphasizing Mexico's readiness to respond only if necessary. She reassured the Mexican public that contingency plans are in place, indicating both defiance and strategy. This showdown could easily spiral into chaos. With murmurs of economic blackmail echoing from both sides, lines have been drawn. Trump's assertion that Mexico must adhere to our demands meets wide-eyed reactions in Mexico, where leaders warn of potential long-term damage to their economy if the U.S. continues its aggressive stance. But what happens next? The looming question lies not only in the potential for escalation but also in the pursuit of diplomacy. If negotiations fail, Mexico may resort to measures like blacklisting American companies and raising taxes on imports, particularly in agriculture and automotive production, an economic shock that could ripple across the border. As the clock ticks down to Sheinbaum's meeting in El Zocalo, the air is thick with tension and uncertainty. Will the two nations find common ground or will they plunge headfirst into the abyss of trade warfare? The answer could alter the financial landscape for years to come. The escalating tensions between Mexico and the United States over trade tariffs have reached a pivotal moment. Sources suggest that if President Trump does not retract his bold threats, the Mexican Ministry of Commerce is contemplating severe measures. They may blacklist American companies and impose additional taxes on key American goods, including agricultural products and crucial components in the manufacturing sector. As the situation intensifies, Mexico leverages its energy trade, particularly with state-owned companies like Pemex. If the flow of oil is disrupted or if taxes rise, American refineries could face dire consequences. This vulnerability threatens to unleash inflation on an already shaky market, igniting political fallout for both nations. President López Obrador of Mexico is skillfully capitalizing on this narrative to solidify support at home, asserting that the Mexican people will not be intimidated by Trump's bluster. Such a stance could ignite national pride and solidarity among Mexicans. On the flip side, Trump is doubling down on his accusations, claiming that Mexico has taken advantage of the U.S. economically and failed to secure its borders. The refusal to back down from either side signals a volatile standoff with no easy exit. Economists warn that this confrontational path may lead to a lose-lose outcome. If Mexico retaliates, it could backfire by hurting its workers as severely as American manufacturers. Shuttered automotive and electronics plants could become a grim reality due to the imposition of trade barriers. While restrictions on oil and gas exports could erode Mexico's earnings. Yet, Mexico's resolve to retaliate remains firm, even as they acknowledge the potential for mutual losses. Whispers of a collective response with allies like Canada and China are growing louder. China has already declared its intention to impose a 15% tariff on U.S. imports starting on March 10. Canada is poised to announce tax increases on iconic American brands if tensions escalate further. Should Mexico join forces with these nations, the Trump administration may find itself ensnared, facing pressure from all directions. In this high-stakes environment, the American manufacturing industry, agricultural sector, technology firms, and even the energy market are on the brink of upheaval, potentially experiencing shockwaves from excessive tariffs and restrictions. The question looms, how will this economic chess game play out, and will diplomacy triumph over the clamor of conflict? As the world watches, the situation teeters on a razor's edge, dependent on the decisions made in the coming days. Last segment warned that a tariff storm could rattle factories, farms, and every supply line. What if a single barrel of oil could sink an election? Mexico has signaled a decisive move. It may slash crude exports or hike prices on the energy front. American refineries, especially those near Texas, will have to scramble for a new formula. Shale output exists, yet Mexican crude remains a lifeline. A sudden shortage could push fuel prices sky-high, sparking inflation across the continent. Those price spikes would bite at farmers, industrialists, and middle-class families alike. President López Obrador sees an opening. Those who threaten us hurt their own voters. His nation knows the United States is still a massive market, but wielding oil as a weapon feels like a high-stakes poker hand. Mexico claims a plan B is ready retaliation if tariffs rise. Experts ask, can diplomacy defuse this brink? Might Trump trim duties or grant exemptions for Mexican auto parts? Mexico, meanwhile, promises not to choke oil production, keeping its cards close. Politics and trade wars can flip the balance in an instant. But Mexico has gone all in, declaring that any U.S. move will meet an economic counterstrike. U.S. trade officials now treat the threat as serious, recognizing Mexico's role in their production chains. Trump's blunt stance, "Nobody negotiates like this," feeds a stubborn standoff. Will the president fold or double down when Mexico flips its final card? We just heard Mexico's ultimatum and felt markets tremble. Can a flash of memory change a continent's fate? Picture a dusty border town at dusk. The smell of diesel mingles with hot dog vendors' grill, while distant trucks grind over cracked pavement. A young worker once whispered, "One day this will end," as metal clanged in the warehouse. That echo still rings as negotiations loom on March 6, when López Obrador will call President Trump directly. Both sides have exchanged notes for weeks, yet only a head-to-head talk can lift the tariff cloud. If the call fails, Mexico hinted at a public announcement in El Zócalo on March 9, unveiling a full-scale countermeasure. Meanwhile, Canada and China watch closely. Beijing plans a 15% duty on U.S. goods, while Ottawa threatens to tax American brands like Tesla. A united front could squeeze the U.S. from four sides, hitting manufacturing, agriculture, tech and energy alike. Will Mexico join forces with its northern and eastern neighbors, or will it act alone? The world waits for the phone to ring, and for the silence that follows. Will the leaders find common ground, or will the sirens of war grow louder? In an escalating trade saga, both the United States and Mexico find themselves at a precarious crossroads. Amid threatened tariffs and rising tensions, both nations are poised for a confrontation that could reshape the landscape of North American trade. While Mexico stands firm, ready to retaliate, the stakes are high. What if one wrong move changes everything? As the trade war heats up, the question remains, can diplomacy prevail, or are we heading toward an all-out economic clash? On one side, President Trump is unwavering, proclaiming that negotiations should be on American terms. Meanwhile, Mexico is signaling that it's prepared to protect its interests with forceful counteractions. The implications could be dire for both nations. Potential disruptions in oil and automotive supply chains hang in the balance. Can Mexico's economic strategies force the U.S. to reconsider its harsh tariffs, or will this result in a mutual spiral of economic damage? The tension could ignite into a conflict no one anticipated. Just days away from decision time, both parties are calculating their next moves. Can either nation afford to blink? Or will they both emerge battered and bruised, realizing that in this game, victory is often an illusion? The clock is ticking, and North America's economic future hangs in the balance. What do you think? Is Mexico poised for serious action, or is this just a strategic bluff? The outcome is uncertain, but the stakes could not be higher.